Sarah Mitchell had two children who called her Mom. Emma and Jake saw her as the person they loved most in the world. But Sarah was the widow of a man murdered by these children's father, David Chen. The night David killed Sarah's husband, he didn't just take one life. He also left two children orphaned. While no one wanted the killer's children, Sarah did something unthinkable. She visited her husband's murderer in prison and told him, "I will raise your children." For 15 years, Emma and Jake called the woman their father had made a widow, Mommy. Every time they said, "I love you," Sarah's heart filled with both joy and torture. Because every time she loved these children, she felt like she was betraying her dead husband. Until the children turned 18 and learned the truth, the question they asked Sarah that day would redefine the limits of forgiveness. Welcome to Stil Human. Here we explore the most profound questions about forgiveness, love, and what it truly means to be human. In this story, you'll witness how one woman's impossible choice challenged everything we think we know about justice, family, and the power of unconditional love. This is about choosing love over hate, healing over revenge, and what happens when forgiveness becomes the most radical act of all. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of forgiveness, tell us where you're watching from today. Which city, which country? Share in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of people who believe in second chances. And if you think love can overcome even the darkest circumstances, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because every day we share stories that prove the human capacity for love knows no limits. September 3rd, 2008, Portland, Oregon. What started as a routine evening for the Mitchell family ended in tragedy that would reshape 3 lives forever. Michael Mitchell, 34 years old, was a social worker who dedicated his life to helping troubled teenagers. His wife Sarah, 29, was a kindergarten teacher who dreamed of having children but struggled with infertility. They had been married for 6 years and were considering adoption, when their world was destroyed by a moment of senseless violence. That evening, Michael was working late at the community center, running a support group for at-risk youth. One of the regular attendees was David Chen, a 28-year-old man with a history of drug addiction and violent outbursts. David had been clean for 3 months and seemed to be making progress. But that night, he arrived at the meeting high on methamphetamine and paranoid. During the session, Michael tried to address David's obvious intoxication. The confrontation escalated quickly. David pulled out a knife and stabbed Michael 3 times in the chest before fleeing the scene. Michael died before the ambulance arrived, bleeding out on the floor of the community center, where he had spent his evenings trying to save young men, exactly like David Chen. Sarah received the call at 9:47 p.m. The words, "Your husband has been killed," didn't register at first. She had been grading kindergarten art projects when the police officer spoke those life-destroying words. At the hospital, Sarah saw Michael's body and felt something die inside her that she thought would never come back. Her capacity to trust, to love, to hope. But Sarah Mitchell was about to discover that love doesn't die, it transforms. David Chen was arrested within 24 hours, found passed out in a drug house, with Michael's blood still on his clothes. The case was straightforward: premeditated murder during a drug-fueled rage. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But during the trial, Sarah learned something that complicated her grief. David Chen had 2 young children. Emma Chen, age 6, and Jake Chen, age 4, had been living with their father since their mother died of a drug overdose 2 years earlier. David's parents had disowned him years before, and there were no other relatives willing to take the children. Emma and Jake were placed in foster care, but the system was overwhelmed and underfunded. Sarah learned that the children were being separated, moved from home to home, and showing signs of severe trauma from losing both their parents in such a short time. The logical response would have been for Sarah to feel satisfied that David's children were suffering, a form of cosmic justice for what their father had done to her family. Instead, Sarah felt something she couldn't explain, maternal instinct toward the children of her husband's killer. "I kept thinking about Michael," Sarah later recalled. "He spent his life trying to help kids like Emma and Jake. He would have been heartbroken to know that children were suffering because of what happened to him." 3 months after Michael's funeral, Sarah made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She applied to become Emma and Jake's foster parent with the intention of adopting them. The social workers thought she was having a breakdown. Sarah's family thought she'd lost her mind. Her friends staged an intervention, begging her to reconsider. "How can you even look at those children without seeing their father?" her sister asked. Sarah's answer was simple. "Because they're not their father. They're just babies who need someone to love them." But Sarah's real motivation was more complex than altruism. She was drowning in grief and rage, and somehow, caring for David's children felt like the only way to honor Michael's memory while healing her own broken heart. The adoption process took 8 months. During that time, Sarah visited Emma and Jake regularly in their foster homes, slowly building relationships with children who had every reason to be suspicious of adults. Emma, now 7, was protective of her little brother and wary of new people. She had been told that her father was sick and had to go away for a long time, but she didn't understand why she couldn't see him, or why strangers kept taking care of her. Jake, 5, was quieter, but clung to anyone who showed him kindness. He would ask every new caregiver if they were going to leave him too. Sarah's first conversation with Emma broke her heart and filled it simultaneously. "Are you going to be our mom?" Emma asked during their 3rd visit. "If you want me to be," Sarah replied. "What happened to our old mom and dad?" Sarah had prepared for this question, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of lying to a child about the truth. "Your mom got very sick and went to heaven. Your dad made some bad choices and can't take care of you anymore." "Did you know our dad?" Sarah paused. "Yes, I knew your dad." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Sarah was already learning that raising these children would require a careful balance between honesty and protection. The adoption was finalized on June 15, 2009, exactly 9 months after Michael's death. Emma and Jake became Emma and Jake Mitchell, and Sarah became the mother she had always dreamed of being, just not in the way she had ever imagined. But becoming their legal mother was the easy part. Learning to love them while carrying the secret of who they really were would be the challenge of Sarah's lifetime. 6 months after the adoption, Sarah received an unexpected letter from David Chen in prison. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell," the letter began, "I don't expect you to forgive me for what I did to your husband. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I heard that you adopted my children, and I needed to thank you. Emma and Jake are the only good things I ever did in my life, and knowing they're safe with you is the only reason I haven't killed myself in here." Sarah stared at the letter for hours. Part of her wanted to burn it. Part of her wanted to write back and tell David exactly what she thought of him. But a small part of her, the part that was learning to love his children, felt something unexpected: pity. Against her better judgment, Sarah wrote back. "David," her letter began, "I didn't adopt Emma and Jake for you. I adopted them for them, and for my husband, who spent his life helping children. But I want you to—" What followed was a correspondence that lasted for years. David would write about his memories of Emma and Jake as babies, about Emma's love of art and Jake's fascination with dinosaurs. Sarah would send photos of school plays, birthday parties, and family vacations. The letters created an impossible relationship. Sarah became the bridge between David and the children he could never see again, while David became the ghost father whose presence shaped their family in ways Emma and Jake could never understand. "Tell them I love them," David would write, "but don't tell them it's from me." So Sarah would find ways to share David's love without revealing its source. When Emma painted a beautiful picture, Sarah would say, "Someone who cares about you very much would be so proud of this." When Jake scored his first soccer goal, Sarah would tell him, "You have someone watching over you who thinks you're amazing." Emma and Jake grew up feeling loved, not just by Sarah, but by mysterious guardian angels they never questioned. As Emma and Jake grew older, Sarah faced increasingly difficult questions about their family history. They wanted to know about their birth parents, their extended family, their medical history. Sarah created careful narratives that contained kernels of truth wrapped in protective lies. She told them their birth mother had struggled with addiction and died young, which was true. She told them their birth father had made terrible choices and couldn't be part of their lives, which was also true. But the hardest moments came when the children showed personality traits that reminded Sarah of the man who had killed her husband. Emma inherited David's artistic talent and his tendency toward intense emotions. When she was angry, her face would contort in expressions that were disturbingly familiar to Sarah. Jake inherited David's intelligence and his struggle with impulsivity. He would sometimes lash out in ways that made Sarah's blood run cold, remembering the night David's lack of control had destroyed her life. In those moments, Sarah had to separate the children from their father's actions, love them for who they were becoming, rather than judge them for the DNA they couldn't control. "I had to learn that Emma and Jake weren't David," Sarah reflected years later. "They were themselves, and they deserved to be loved for their own hearts, not punished for his mistakes." But Sarah also knew that someday she would have to tell them the truth, and she dreaded that day more than anything else in her life. The truth came out on Emma's 18th birthday, not because Sarah planned it, but because Emma found David's letters. Sarah had kept every letter David had sent over the years, storing them in a locked box in her bedroom closet. She planned to give them to Emma and Jake someday, when they were old enough to understand the complexity of their situation. But while looking for old photo albums for Emma's birthday party, Jake accidentally knocked over the box, spilling years of correspondence across the bedroom floor. Emma read the first letter in silence, her face growing paler with each sentence. When she finished, she looked at Sarah with an expression of betrayal that broke Sarah's heart. "Our father killed your husband," Emma said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Sarah replied. "And you knew this when you adopted us?" "Yes." Jake, now 16, picked up another letter and began reading. "He writes about us like he loves us." "He does love you," Sarah said quietly. "How could you do this?" Emma's voice was rising. "How could you lie to us for our entire lives? How could you pretend to love us when we're the children of the man who destroyed your life?" Sarah had rehearsed this conversation in her mind thousands of times, but nothing had prepared her for the pain in Emma's eyes. "I didn't pretend to love you," Sarah said. "I do love you, You are my children, as much as if I had given birth to you myself." "But why?" Jake asked, tears streaming down his face. "Why would you want us after what he did?" Sarah's answer came from the deepest part of her heart. "Because the moment I met you, I realized that hating your father was destroying me, but loving you was healing me. You didn't choose him as a father, and I didn't choose to become a widow, but we did choose to become a family." The conversation that followed lasted hours. Emma and Jake asked every question Sarah had feared. Did she really love them? Had she adopted them to punish them? Did she see their father when she looked at them? But the question that changed everything came from Jake. "Do you want us to hate him?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "I want you to understand that what he did was wrong and inexcusable. But I don't want you to hate him, because hating him would mean hating part of yourselves. And you are not responsible for his actions." Emma asked the final question. "Do you forgive him?" Sarah paused. After 10 years, she had never asked herself this question directly. "I forgive him for your sake," she said finally, "because carrying hatred was killing me, and I needed to be alive to be your mother." Today, Emma is 22 and studying social work, inspired by the stepfather she never met, and the mother who showed her that love is stronger than revenge. Jake is 20 and volunteers with at-risk youth, helping kids who remind him of the father he's learning to understand without excusing. David Chen died in prison in 2022, but not before receiving one final letter from Sarah that included graduation photos. Sarah Mitchell proved that the most radical act of love is choosing to heal rather than hurt, to build rather than destroy, to mother rather than mourn. She transformed the greatest tragedy of her life into the greatest gift she could give, not just to Emma and Jake, but to the memory of the husband whose legacy lived on through her capacity to love the children of his killer. At Stil Human, we believe that love has the power to transform even the darkest circumstances. Sometimes the most extraordinary families are born not from blood, but from choice. What would you do in Sarah's situation? How far does forgiveness extend? What does it truly mean to choose love over hate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every day we share stories that prove the human capacity for love and forgiveness knows no limits. See you in the next story.